"You're not leaving this room in that dress," he roared, his voice shaking the very walls of the penthouse. Maya stared up at him, her own anger finally boiling over. "And who are you to tell me what to wear?" "My husband." "You haven't been my husband in months, Marcus. You're just a man who pays the mortgage and sleeps in my bed like a stranger. You don't get to play the protective husband now." She tried to duck under his arm, but he caught her waist, his large hand spanning nearly the entire width of her side. The contact was electric. It had been so long since he'd touched her that the sensation felt like a shock to her system. "Hello, lovelies. Welcome back to the channel. I know you're eager to watch the full video. Well, I am also eager to give it to you all. But before then, can you do me a quick favor? Kindly like this video, share it with someone who loves a spicy romance, and if you haven't already, subscribe and turn on that notification bell. You won't want to miss a single second of how this awesome billionaire romance. Are you done? Good. Now, let's dive into the main story and see how it all began. The penthouse was too quiet. It was the kind of silence that had a weight to it, a heavy, suffocating pressure that settled into the corners of the room and stayed there. It was a silence that echoed, bouncing off the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the glowing Atlanta skyline. For 3 years, this home had been a sanctuary of soul music, late-night laughter, and the constant, comforting hum of Marcus's deep voice. Now, it felt like a museum, beautiful, expensive, and completely dead. Maya sat at her vanity, staring at her reflection in the oversized, gold-rimmed mirror. She was beautiful, but she looked like a stranger to herself. Her dark skin was glowing under the warm vanity lights, and her hair was styled in soft, voluminous waves that framed her face perfectly. But her eyes looked tired. Not the kind of tired that a good night's sleep could fix, but a soul-deep exhaustion that came from months of wondering where she had gone wrong. She was 26 years old, married to Marcus Vance, a man who appeared on the cover of Forbes and Black Enterprise more often than he appeared at their dinner table lately. She was the wife of a billionaire, living a life millions of women dreamed of, and yet she had never felt more invisible. Marcus used to be her best friend. When they first married, the world outside didn't exist. They were the it couple, young, wealthy, and deeply, visibly in love. Maya remembered the first year, how he would come home early just to watch her cook, his large hands finding her waist as he whispered about how much he'd missed her during his 8-hour workday. He used to leave handwritten notes on her pillow and surprise her with midday lunch dates at their favorite hole-in-the-wall Caribbean spot just to see her smile. Back then, his wealth was just a backdrop. It was his heart that she lived for. Then, 6 months ago, the lights went out. It wasn't a sudden explosion. There was no big fight, no dramatic accusation. It was a slow, agonizing cooling. The I love yous became shorter, then infrequent, then non-existent. The morning coffees in silk robes were replaced by Marcus leaving before the sun was up. The shared dinners became solo meals for Maya while he worked late. She had done what any woman would do. She had searched for the other woman. She had checked his phones while he showered, looked through his pockets, and even sniffed his collars like a detective. There was never the scent of another woman's perfume. There were no secret messages, no lipstick stains, no hotel receipts. He wasn't cheating. He was just gone. He was a ghost haunting his own house. He ate in silence, slept on the very edge of their king-sized bed as if touching her would burn him, and stopped asking her how her day was. "I can't do this anymore," Maya whispered to the empty, marble-floored bedroom. Her voice cracked, the sound vanishing into the plush rugs. She reached into her bedside drawer and pulled out a thick manila envelope. Inside were the divorce papers. She had signed her name in shaky ink earlier that afternoon. She was meeting the lawyer at 10 a.m. tomorrow morning to finalize the filing. It felt like she was mourning a man who was still breathing in the next room. It was the hardest decision she had ever made, but the loneliness was starting to make her feel like she was disappearing. Maya stood up, wiping a stray tear before it could ruin her makeup. She wasn't going to sit here and cry tonight. Not again. She walked over to the walk-in closet, a room larger than the apartment she grew up in, and reached for the dress she had bought 3 weeks ago during a fit of frustrated retail therapy. She had never had the courage to wear it. It was a shimmering, midnight black piece of silk that felt like water in her hands. She stepped into it, the fabric clinging to every curve of her body like a second skin. It was a revenge dress in every sense of the word. It had a slit that climbed dangerously high up her left thigh and a back so low it ended just an inch above her tailbone. It left nothing to the imagination and everything to be desired. As she zipped herself up, she felt a flicker of the old Maya. She wasn't just Mrs. Vance. the neglected wife. She was Maya Thompson, a woman who was vibrant, beautiful, and alive. Tonight, her best friends, Tasha and Keisha, were dragging her to the Onyx Lounge. They had been begging her to get out of the house for weeks. "You need to remind yourself that you're a 10, Maya," Tasha had said over the phone. "And if Marcus wants to act like a blind man, let him. But the rest of Atlanta has eyes." Maya stepped into her 4-inch stilettos, applied a final coat of deep red lipstick, and grabbed her designer clutch. She checked the time, 9:45 p.m. Marcus wouldn't be home for hours. He'd likely stay at the office until 2 a.m., then crawl into bed without saying a word. This was her chance to slip out and have one night where she didn't feel like a piece of furniture. She walked out of the master suite, her heels clicking sharply against the marble floor of the long hallway. The sound was rhythmic, like a heartbeat. Click, click, click. She reached the top of the grand staircase and paused. The house was dimly lit, save for the glow coming from the living room. Her heart skipped a beat. Had she left the lights on? She descended the stairs slowly, her hand gripping the cold iron railing. As she rounded the corner into the main living area, she froze. The large, circular lamp in the corner was on, casting long, dramatic shadows across the room. And there, sitting on the charcoal leather sofa, was Marcus. He didn't look like the polished billionaire the public saw. His white dress shirt was unbuttoned halfway down his chest, his silk tie discarded on the coffee table. His sleeves were rolled up, revealing the powerful, muscular forearms that Maya used to love tracing with her fingers. He looked exhausted. His head was down, his eyes fixed on a stack of legal folders spread out before him. A glass of amber bourbon sat on the table beside him, condensation dripping down the side. Maya's breath hitched. She hadn't expected him home. Not tonight. Not when she was dressed like this. Her first instinct was to turn around and run back upstairs, to hide the dress and the fact that she was leaving him tomorrow. But then, a spark of anger flared in her chest. Why should she hide? He was the one who had checked out of the marriage. He was the one who had made her feel like a ghost. She lifted her chin, squared her shoulders, and started walking toward the front door. She didn't look at him. She focused all her energy on the gold handle of the massive oak door. She pretended the air hadn't just become 10 times thicker. She pretended her heart wasn't thudding against her ribs like a trapped bird. She was almost there. She was 5 feet from freedom. "Where do you think you're going, Maya?" His voice was a low rumble. It wasn't the distant, robotic tone he had used for months. It was deep, rough, and vibrating with an authority that made the hair on her arms stand up. It was the voice of the man she had fallen in love with, the man who took what he wanted and protected what was his. Maya didn't stop. She reached out and placed her hand on the cold metal of the door handle. "Out," she said, her voice sounding thinner than she wanted it to. The sound of a heavy folder slamming shut echoed through the high-ceilinged room like a gunshot. Maya didn't have time to turn the handle. In a blur of movement, Marcus was off the couch. Before she could react, a large, warm hand slammed against the wood of the door just inches above her head, pinning her in place. Maya gasped, spinning around to face him. He was so close she could feel the heat radiating off his body. He smelled like expensive sandalwood, tobacco, and the sharp bite of bourbon. It was a masculine, intoxicating scent that had haunted her dreams for months. Marcus was towering over her. At 6 feet 4 inches, he made her feel tiny, but tonight, his presence was overwhelming. His dark eyes, usually so cold and distant lately, were burning. They were roaming over her body, taking in every inch of exposed skin, the way the silk hugged her hips, and the sheer audacity of the dress. His jaw was clenched so tight a muscle was jumping in his cheek, and his nostrils flared with every heavy breath. "I know you heard me," he growled. The anger in his voice was palpable, but beneath it was something else, something raw and hungry. "Move, Marcus," Maya said, her voice trembling. She tried to push against his chest, but it was like pushing against a brick wall. He didn't budge an inch. "I'm going to a club with Tasha and Keisha. I have a life. Not that you've noticed or cared for the last half a year." His gaze snapped back to her face, his eyes locking onto hers with a terrifying intensity. He leaned in closer, his chest almost brushing against the peaks of her breasts. The tension between them was a physical thing, a wire stretched so tight it was screaming. "You're not leaving this room in that dress," he roared, his voice shaking the very walls of the penthouse. Maya stared up at him, her own anger finally boiling over. "And who are you to tell me what to wear?" "My husband." "You haven't been my husband in months, Marcus." You're just a man who pays the mortgage and sleeps in my bed like a stranger. You don't get to play the protective husband now." She tried to duck under his arm, but he caught her waist, his large hand spanning nearly the entire width of her side. The contact was electric. It had been so long since he'd touched her that the sensation felt like a shock to her system. "I said," Marcus hissed, his face inches from hers, his eyes dark with a possessiveness she hadn't seen in years, "that you are not stepping 1 foot out of this door looking like that. Not for other men to gawk at. Not while you still carry my name. Then maybe I won't carry it for much longer." Maya shouted back, the secret of the papers in her drawer clawing at her throat. The silence that followed was even heavier than before. Marcus's grip on her waist tightened just a fraction, his eyes searching hers, looking for the lie. But he found only the truth, her pain, her loneliness, and her desperation. For a moment, the billionaire facade cracked. He looked at her not as a problem to be solved or a distraction to be avoided, but as the woman he was losing. But the anger was still there, fueled by a jealousy he clearly hadn't expected to feel. "You think you can just walk out?" he whispered, his voice dangerously low. "In a dress that invites every man in the city to touch what belongs to me." "I don't belong to you," she cried, her eyes filling with tears she refused to let fall. "You stopped claiming me a long time ago." Marcus didn't answer with words. Instead, he leaned into her space, his shadow completely swallowing her, his hand moving from her waist to the back of her neck, his thumb tracing the sensitive skin behind her ear. "We're going to talk, Maya," he rasped. "But first, you're going to take this dress off. Because the only man seeing you in this tonight is me." Maya felt the heat of Marcus's hand on her neck, but she didn't melt. Instead, she felt a surge of cold, hard defiance. For 6 months, she had been a beggar for his attention, and she was done begging. She wasn't going to let a few pretty words and a rough voice erase the half-year of loneliness he had put her through. She shoved against his chest with both hands, using every bit of strength she had. He was solid as an oak tree, but her sudden aggression made him step back just an inch. "Don't you dare touch me like you still have the right," Maya hissed, her eyes narrowed into slits. "You think you can just flip a switch? You think you can ignore me until I'm ready to jump off a bridge, and then walk over here and play the big, bad husband because I put on a dress you don't like?" Marcus's face darkened, his jaw shifting as he tried to contain his temper. "I told you why I was distant, Maya. I was trying to save our future. You were saving your ego, Marcus. You were saving your bank account. I didn't ask for a billionaire, I asked for a husband. And since you've resigned from that position, I'm moving on." She tried to sidestep him again, but he blocked her path, his massive frame looming over her. "Move, Marcus. If you lay another hand on me to stop me from leaving this house, I will call the police. I will tell them Marcus Vance is assaulting his wife. I'll make sure the press hears about it before you even reach the station." Marcus let out a low, dangerous growl. He stepped deep into her personal space, his chest brushing her shoulders. "Assaulting you? Maya, don't be ridiculous. You're my wife. We are in our home. If I decide that my wife isn't going out looking like a walking invitation for every predator in Atlanta, I have every right to take that dress off you myself. Do you really want to dare me?" Maya didn't flinch. She reached into her clutch and pulled out her phone. "You think I'm joking? You think I'm still that sweet, compliant girl who waits for you to come home? Watch me." She didn't call the police. Instead, she hit the speed dial for Tasha. "Tasha, I'm at the penthouse. Marcus is blocking the door. He won't let me leave. Bring the crew. Now." She hung up and stared him down. "They are 5 minutes away." They were already circling the block. "You want to have a scene in the lobby of the Vance Towers? Because that's what's about to happen." Marcus looked like he wanted to break something. He paced the small area of the foyer like a caged lion, his eyes never leaving her. "You're acting like you've lost your mind, Maya. You're going to bring people into our private business." "Our business stopped being private when you stopped talking to me," she snapped. True to her word, less than 10 minutes later, the private elevator chimed. The doors slid open to reveal Tasha and Keisha, looking like they were ready for battle. But they weren't alone. Standing behind them were 3 tall, muscular guys, friends from their college days who had always been protective of Maya. Tasha stepped forward, her heels clicking aggressively on the marble. "Marcus, move away from the door. Now." Marcus looked at the 3 men, his eyes filled with pure, unadulterated venom. The air in the room turned icy. The 3 guys didn't back down, though they clearly knew who Marcus Vance was. She's an adult, man. One of the guys, Andre, said firmly. If she wants to go out, she's going out. You can't keep her prisoner because you're having a bad night. Marcus stepped toward Andre, his fists clenched at his sides. Get out of my house before I have security throw you off the balcony. Marcus, stop it. Maya yelled, stepping between them. I'm leaving. Either I leave with them, or I leave with the police. Your choice. The silence in the room was deafening. Marcus looked at Maya, his expression a mix of betrayal and raw possessiveness. He looked at the revenge dress one last time. He knew he was losing. If he fought them all now, he'd lose her forever. Fine, Marcus said, his voice dropping to a terrifyingly calm level. You want to go? Go. But you are not wearing that. If you want to go to the club, you go upstairs and put on something that doesn't show your entire soul to the world. Change the dress, and I'll let you walk out that door. Maya wanted to argue, but she saw the look in his eyes. This was his final stand. Tasha nodded at her, a silent signal that this was a fair compromise for now. Maya ran upstairs, her heart racing. She swapped the silk midnight dress for a dark green jumpsuit. It was still tight, still sexy, but it covered her back and had a more modest neckline. She grabbed her bag and ran back down. Marcus was standing by the window, his back to the room. He didn't even turn around as she walked out with her friends. The Onyx Lounge was pulsing with bass and strobe lights. The smell of expensive perfume and sweat filled the air. Maya tried to lose herself in the music. She was on the dance floor with Tasha and Keisha, finally feeling the weight of the last 6 months lift off her shoulders. She was laughing, her hips moving to the beat, when she felt a pair of hands slide onto her waist from behind. She assumed it was Andre or one of the guys they came with. She turned around, expecting a friendly face, but it was a stranger, a man with a hungry grin and eyes that were wandering where they shouldn't. You're too beautiful to be dancing alone, sweetheart. The man yelled over the music, pulling her closer. Maya felt a wave of discomfort. I'm with friends, thanks, she said, trying to pull away. The man didn't let go. He tightened his grip on her hips. Come on, just one dance. Don't be like. Suddenly, the man was yanked backward so hard he nearly flew off his feet. Before Maya could blink, a shadow moved past her. It was Marcus. He hadn't stayed home. He had followed her. The music seemed to fade into the background as Marcus grabbed the man by the front of his shirt. Marcus's face was a mask of pure, primal rage. I told her no, Marcus growled. The man tried to swing at Marcus, but Marcus caught his arm midair. There was a sickening crack, the sound of a bone snapping or a joint being forced too far. The man screamed in agony as Marcus sent a devastating punch into his jaw, dropping him to the floor like a sack of stones. The club erupted. People were cheering, filming with their phones, and shouting. Marcus stood over the man, his chest heaving, looking like a god of war. Marcus, what are you doing? Maya screamed, rushing over to him. You're going to get arrested. Stop it. Marcus turned his gaze to her. He didn't look sorry. He didn't look calm. He looked like a man who had reached his breaking point. I told you, he said, his voice cutting through the club music. No one touches what's mine. I am not a piece of property. Maya cried, embarrassed and terrified by the violence. Marcus didn't argue. He didn't use words. He stepped forward, reached down, and threw Maya over his shoulder in one swift motion. Put me down. Marcus, put me down right now, she shrieked, hammering her fists against his broad, muscular back. He ignored her. He marched through the crowd, the sea of people parting for him like he was Moses. Tasha and Keisha tried to intervene, but Marcus gave them a look that froze them in their tracks. He walked out of the club, ignoring the bouncers and the cameras. He reached his black SUV, opened the back door, and tucked her inside before she could scramble out. He climbed in right after her, locking the doors with a sharp click. Drive, Marcus commanded the driver. He turned to Maya, his eyes dark and burning. We are going home. And this time, we are finishing that conversation. The car ride back to the penthouse was filled with a thick, suffocating silence. Maya sat as far away from Marcus as possible, her back pressed against the leather door, staring out at the blurred lights of the city. Her heart was still racing from the scene at the club. She was humiliated, furious, and most of all, confused. As soon as the SUV pulled into the private garage and the doors unlocked, Maya didn't wait for the driver or for Marcus. She bolted. She ran toward the private elevator, her breath coming in short, jagged gasps. She heard Marcus's heavy footsteps behind her, but she didn't look back. The elevator doors slid shut just as he reached them, and she felt a small sense of triumph as she ascended alone. The moment she stepped into the penthouse, she ran straight for the master bedroom. She slammed the heavy oak door shut and turned the lock with a sharp click. Seconds later, a heavy thud hit the other side of the door. "Maya, open this door," Marcus commanded, his voice muffled but vibrating with authority. "Go away, Marcus," she screamed back, her voice cracking. "I don't want to see you. I don't want to be in the same room as you. Go sleep in the guest room." "Maya, don't be childish. We need to talk about what happened tonight." "Childish? You beat a man half to death and hauled me out of a club like I was a sack of flour. There is nothing to talk about. Sleep in the guest room, or sleep on the floor. I don't care. Just stay away from me." There was a long silence on the other side of the door. She held her breath, waiting for him to break the door down. She knew he could if he wanted to. But instead, she heard his receding footsteps. A few minutes later, the distant sound of the guest suite door closing echoed through the hallway. Maya collapsed onto the bed and sobbed. She didn't move until the sun came up. The next morning, a soft knock came at the door. "Maya, I've had breakfast brought up. Open the door so we can eat." She didn't answer. She sat on the floor, leaning her back against the bed, staring at the door. She didn't eat. She didn't come out. For 3 whole days, the penthouse became a battlefield of silence. Marcus knocked every morning and every evening. He left trays of food that went untouched. He tried to call her, but she had blocked his number. She spent her time staring at the divorce papers on the nightstand, her resolve hardening with every hour that passed. On the 3rd day, she realized she couldn't stay hidden forever. She had an appointment with her lawyer, Mr. Sterling, at 6 p.m. to finalize the filing. She needed to leave. She waited until the late afternoon, thinking Marcus would be at the office. She dressed in a simple, professional suit, grabbed the envelope containing the papers, and quietly unlocked the bedroom door. She crept toward the living area, hoping to slip out unnoticed. But as she passed the home bar, she stopped. Marcus was there. He wasn't at the office. He was sitting on a high leather stool, a half-empty bottle of expensive scotch in front of him. He looked like a man who hadn't slept in a week. His hair was messy, and a thick shadow of stubble covered his jaw. Maya froze, expecting a confrontation. She expected him to roar at her, to block the door again, or to demand an apology for the last 3 days. But Marcus didn't even look at her. He stared straight ahead at the rows of crystal glasses, took a slow sip of his drink, and ignored her completely. It was as if she were a ghost in her own home. He stood up, adjusted his shirt, a brand new, crisp white linen shirt she had never seen before, and walked past her toward the guest suite without saying a single word. Maya stood there, stunned. She realized then that since his clothes were all in the main dressing room attached to the master bedroom she had locked him out of, he must have sent his assistant to buy him an entirely new wardrobe just so he wouldn't have to ask her for his things. The level of his pride was staggering. Hello, lovelies. The silence in that penthouse is deafening, isn't it? We've come to the end of the first episode of this story, and things are only going to get more intense from here. Can Marcus's pride survive his love for Maya? Or will those papers be signed after all? Let's meet in the 2nd episode to find out. Don't forget to like, share, and comment on this video. Tell me, would you have stayed behind that locked door for 3 days? Also, kindly subscribe to my channel if you haven't done so. Until next time, stay lovely.